Most people who hear 30% returns per year immediately think of one thing: some secret investment strategy, some hidden stock, some insider trick, some formula the rich keep for themselves. But Charlie Munger would laugh at that. He'd say something brutally simple: you don't earn 30% returns with intelligence, you earn them with behavior. And that's the uncomfortable truth almost nobody wants to hear. The world is obsessed with what to invest in: the stock, the crypto, the real estate deal, the hot opportunity, the next big thing. But the wealthy don't focus on what, they focus on how they behave. Because before you ever get a 30% return from the market, you must first get a 30% return on your mindset. Let me explain what that really means. The average person sabotages their own returns long before the market ever does. They panic when prices fall. They chase whatever just went up. They get greedy. They get scared. They get bored. They can't sit still. They can't delay gratification. They can't resist lifestyle inflation. They can't ignore the noise. They react emotionally to everything. And then they wonder why their investments never grow. Munger called this the great financial irony. The market is not your enemy. Your impulses are. The truth is, you don't need a PhD to outperform most people. You don't need special access. You don't need extreme intelligence. You don't need to be born rich. You need one simple habit. One habit that Munger used for decades. One habit that Warren Buffett also built his fortune on. One habit that separates the wealthy from the permanently average. And here's the twist. This habit has nothing to do with picking stocks. It has everything to do with controlling yourself, because the market always rewards temperament more than talent. Let's dig into this. Most people fail financially for one reason: they never learn to do nothing. They confuse action with progress. They think the more they tinker, the more they trade, the more they hustle, the more money they'll make. But Munger understood something different. The big money is not in the buying or the selling. It's in the waiting. Waiting is a habit. Patience is a habit. Restraint is a habit. And those habits create 30% returns. The moment you learn to do nothing while others panic, you stop losing money. The moment you learn to hold while others chase excitement, your returns grow. The moment you learn to ignore noise, your investments compound. The moment you learn to think long term, your decisions improve. But here's the hard part. Doing nothing is uncomfortable for the average person. The average person needs stimulation. They need dopamine. They need movement. They need to feel like they're working to get rich. So they constantly change strategies. They constantly interrupt compounding. They constantly destroy their own progress, and then they blame the market. But Munger knew the truth. A majority of life's problems come from not letting things sit. Most people do too much. The wealthy do less, but they do it consistently. They don't jump around. They don't react. They don't panic. They don't overthink. They don't chase shortcuts. They simply build one habit: the habit of staying rational when everyone else loses their mind. Let me show you how powerful this is with a simple thought. If the average investor just stopped reacting emotionally, their returns would instantly double. Not because they became smarter, but because they stopped interrupting compounding. If they stopped panic selling, stopped fear buying, stopped chasing hype, stopped timing the market, stopped comparing themselves to others, they'd make more money by doing less. That is the paradox of investing. The less emotional you are, the more returns you get. The more self-controlled you are, the more wealth you build. The calmer you are, the richer you become. 30% returns come from emotional mastery, not financial tricks. Let me make it even clearer. A person with average intelligence and extraordinary patience will always outperform a person with extraordinary intelligence and no patience. This is what Munger meant when he said the first rule is not to be brilliant. The first rule is not to be stupid. And emotional decisions are financial stupidity. The habit that creates 30% returns isn't glamorous. It isn't exciting. It won't go viral on TikTok. It won't impress your friends. It's the habit of being the one person in the room who doesn't lose their mind when others are panicking. It's the habit of being rational when the world is irrational. It's the habit of sitting still while the impatient destroy themselves. It's the habit of doing the opposite of what your impulses want. To put it simply, 30% returns come from emotional discipline, not financial brilliance. And until you master the habit of controlling yourself, the market will never reward you. But once you master it, everything changes. Your decisions change, your relationship with money changes, your reaction to chaos changes, your confidence grows, your patience grows, your portfolio grows, your life grows, because the market eventually rewards those who can stay calm longer than others, can stay greedy or afraid. This is what part 2 will show you, the exact psychological triggers that destroy your returns and how the wealthy avoid them, with a level of emotional discipline that looks almost superhuman. The world isn't driven by greed or fear. It's driven by envy, impulse, and stupidity. What he meant is simple. Most people don't lose money because of the market. They lose money because they cannot control themselves. Before you ever destroy your portfolio, you destroy your mindset. Before you ever lose thousands, you lose discipline. Before you ever interrupt compounding, you let your emotions take over. Let's reveal the 5 psychological triggers that silently kill returns and why mastering them unlocks 30% growth that others never touch. 1. The impulse trigger, I must react immediately. Humans are wired to react fast. It kept our ancestors alive. But in investing, reaction is death. The average person sees the market fall 5% and feels a shock of panic shoot through their chest. Their brain screams, do something, fix it now. So they sell at the worst possible moment every time. They react to headlines. They react to fear. They react to others reacting. They don't realize they've fallen into Munger's warning. If you're easily influenced, the market will rob you blind. Rich thinking people don't react, they respond. They pause. They analyze. They think. They remain calm. They understand something the average person never does. The first loss isn't money. The first loss is emotional, control. And once you lose that, your returns collapse so too. The dopamine trigger, I need excitement. This is the silent killer of all wealth. We live in a dopamine-addicted world. People check their phones every 20 seconds. They scroll endlessly. They seek constant stimulation. They crave novelty. And the market becomes another drug. Let me check my portfolio again. Let me buy something new. Let me sell because I'm bored. Let me chase whatever just went up. They confuse activity with progress. But Munger knew the truth. Avoiding stupidity is easier than seeking brilliance. And chasing excitement is stupidity. The wealthy understand this. Wealth is created by boredom. Poverty is created by excitement. The people who lose money need entertainment. The people who build wealth need discipline. I3. The comparison trigger, I should be doing what others are doing. This one destroys more portfolios than bad strategy ever could. You see someone on social media bragging about a 200% crypto gain. You see your friend making money from some new stock. You see strangers online claiming they found the next big thing. And suddenly your calm, disciplined plan feels stupid. You feel behind. You feel inferior. You feel pressured. So you chase what's hot. You panic when others panic. You copy strategies you don't understand. And you end up doing the worst thing possible. You abandon your own plan for someone else's highlight reel. Munger warned about this ruthlessly. The big money is in being right, not in being popular. Comparison makes you stupid. Stupidity destroys returns. 4. The ego trigger. I can beat the market. This is the most expensive belief a human being can have. The moment you think you're smarter than the market humbles you. People overtrade because they think they're brilliant. People time the market because they think they're geniuses. People chase hype because they think they see something others don't. Ego is financial poison. Munger said it simply, if you think you're smart, you're already in trouble. 30% returns come from humility, not arrogance. The wealthy accept slowness. They accept boredom. They accept waiting. They accept uncertainty. Their ego is quiet. Their portfolio is loud. The poor do the opposite. Dada 5, the panic trigger. Everything is falling. I must escape. This is the final boss of financial psychology. Markets fall. They always fall. They fall dramatically. They fall violently. They fall unexpectedly. And when they do, the average person collapses mentally. They feel danger. They feel fear. They feel loss before anything has actually been lost. So they sell. They sell low. They lock in losses. They destroy compounding. They break the one rule Munger never broke. Never interrupt compounding unnecessarily. The market rewards people who can withstand fear. It punishes people who cannot tolerate discomfort. If you panic at every dip, you can't even reach 8% returns, let alone 30%. The real reason these triggers kill 30% returns because they force you into the worst decisions at the worst moments in the worst possible ways. They make you buy high, they make you sell low. They make you switch strategies. They make you interrupt compounding. They make you behave irrationally. They make you sabotage yourself. People want 30% returns, but they don't want the emotional discipline required to get them. They want wealth, but refuse the mindset that creates it. They want success, but cling to the psychology of failure. Munger understood the solution. Master the triggers, or the triggers master you. You don't need perfect timing. You don't need the perfect stock. You don't need extreme intelligence. You need control, self-control, emotional control, psychological control. Because 30% returns aren't achieved in the market. They're achieved in your mind. And once you defeat these triggers, you unlock what most people spend their entire lives chasing, the ability to stay rational while the world goes insane. That's the real edge. That's the real alpha. That's the real secret. And in part 3, you'll see the exact behaviors wealthy investors use every day to avoid these triggers and create extraordinary returns year after. Yea, by now you know the truth that most people never discover. You don't get 30% returns because you found the perfect investment. You get 30% returns because you develop the behaviors that allow compounding to actually work. This is where the average person fails. They think success comes from intelligence, strategies, predictions, or luck. But Munger always insisted the great investors are not the smartest. They are the most prepared to behave well. And behaving well means doing things the average person will never do because they look too boring, too slow, too simple, and too unexciting to matter. But they matter more than anything else. These behaviors are not glamorous. They don't feel heroic. Nobody applauds you for them, but they quietly build fortunes while the rest of the world destroys their own. Let's break down the 6 behaviors that make 30% returns possible, not through fantasy, but through discipline. 1, the behavior of relentless consistency. Most people are consistent only when it's convenient. They save when they feel good. They invest when they're motivated. They stick to their plan when life is easy. The wealthy, they are consistent when it's boring, consistent when it's uncomfortable, consistent when it hurts. They invest automatically. They save automatically. They continue during fear. They continue during chaos. They continue during uncertainty. Consistency is their religion, not intensity, not excitement, not luck, just repetition. Munger said, take a simple idea and take it seriously. Consistency is that idea. 2, the behavior of long-term thinking. The average investor thinks in minutes, hours, days, maybe weeks. The wealthy think in years and decades. This one shift alone multiplies returns more than intelligence ever could. While others are asking, is now a good time to buy? Should I sell before the market drops? What if it crashes tomorrow? The wealthy ask one question. What will this look like in 10 years? Long-term thinking is the weapon that kills fear. It silences panic. It neutralizes emotion. It protects compounding. Munger insisted the first rule is never to interrupt compounding. The second rule is never forget the first rule. Thinking long-term protects both rules. Munger 3, the behavior of delayed gratification. The poverty mindset wants pleasure now. The wealth mindset wants freedom later. This difference is everything. People say, I deserve this. I'll save next month. I'll invest when I earn more. This little purchase won't matter. Every small indulgence delays compounding. Every indulgence steals from your future. Every unnecessary purchase reduces your returns. The wealthy understand this deeply. They don't chase dopamine. They don't chase bragging rights. They don't chase appearance. They chase freedom. They don't need the new phone. They don't need the new car. They don't need the fancy vacation. Their priority is simple. Buy assets now so that assets buy everything later. Or for. The behavior of emotional neutrality, this is one of the rarest traits in existence. Most people make decisions from emotion. Fear, greed, ego, envy, boredom, impatience, insecurity. Emotion is the enemy of returns. Munger said, a person's worst enemy is often themselves. The wealthy learn to sit with emotion without acting on it. They feel fear, but they don't panic. They feel excitement, but they don't chase. They feel temptation, but they don't react. They feel envy, but they don't imitate. They treat emotions like weather, annoying, temporary, irrelevant. Emotion is background noise. Discipline is the signal. The behavior of extreme simplicity. Here is a secret the finance world hates. The wealthy are not obsessed with complexity. They are obsessed with simplicity. Most retail investors fail because they want something complicated. A complex strategy feels smart. A simple strategy feels stupid. But the wealthy don't care about feeling smart. They care about being effective. Their portfolios are simple. Their rules are simple. Their habits are simple. Their decisions are simple. They don't trade constantly. They don't switch strategies. They don't gamble. They don't chase trends. They don't time the market. They choose a clear path and stick to it for decades. This is why Munger said the world is full of smart people who can't sit still. Simplicity is their advantage. They're at choose 6. The behavior of rational opportunism, this is the trait that bridges the gap between average returns and extraordinary returns. The wealthy wait patiently for opportunities, but when the right one appears, they strike hard. They don't rush. They don't chase. They don't guess. But when the moment arrives, they act decisively. This is what Buffett meant by be fearful when others are greedy and greedy when others are fearful. And what Munger meant by the key is waiting for the fat pitch. They wait for the rare moment when the reward is high and the risk is low. This combination is rare, but when it comes, it changes your life. And only those with the emotional discipline built in, parts 1 and 2, can act on these moments correctly. Why these behaviors create 30% returns? Because the market rewards patience, consistency, calm thinking, simplicity, delayed gratification, rationality, emotional control, long-term vision. It punishes impulsiveness, fear, ego, comparison, complexity, impatience, constant trading, short-term focus. 30% returns are not built by brilliance. They're built by the behaviors that allow compounding to run unbroken for years, even decades. This is why Munger said, not doing stupid things is harder than it looks. Most people sabotage their own returns long before the market does. But those who master these behaviors unlock results the average investor will never experience. And in part 4, you'll see the final transformation, how one simple habit practiced over years turns ordinary investors into extraordinary ones. By now you understand the truth that almost nobody ever accepts. Extraordinary returns don't come from extraordinary intelligence. They come from extraordinary behavior. And once you build the behaviors we covered in the previous parts, something begins to shift inside you slowly. At first, then suddenly, then permanently. Your decisions change. Your reactions change. Your expectations change. Your identity changes. And that inner transformation is what finally unlocks the habit behind 30% returns. Most people think the secret is some formula, some strategy, some trick. But Charlie Munger insisted from the very beginning, the world rewards discipline, patience, and rationality, not brilliance. And when you internalize that deeply, your entire relationship with wealth becomes different. Let me show you what this transformation actually looks like. R1. You stop trying to predict and start preparing. Instead, most investors spend their entire lives guessing, is this the top? Is this the bottom? What if it crashes tomorrow? What if I miss out? They treat the market like a roulette wheel. But once your mindset upgrades, you realize prediction is foolish. Buffett and Munger never relied on predictions. They relied on preparation. They didn't try to time the market. They positioned themselves so the market eventually rewarded them. They didn't chase the future. They built habits that guaranteed the future took care of itself. This is the shift. The average investor reacts to the market. The extraordinary investor is ready for it. And readiness produces better returns than prediction ever will. That's 2. You stop interrupting compounding, no matter what. Here is where the magic begins. The average investor destroys compounding in dozens of small ways. Selling when scared, buying when excited, switching strategies, moving money constantly, chasing hype, listening to noise. Each interruption resets compounding like pulling the plug on a machine every few minutes. But once your mindset transforms, you stop doing this completely. You guard compounding like your life depends on it, because financially it does. You stop touching what doesn't need touching. You stop reacting. You stop tinkering. You stop letting impulses pilot your decisions. And for the first time, compounding actually has the time it needs to work. The wealthy aren't magicians. They're simply patient enough to let compounding do the heavy lifting. Now 3, you become comfortable with boredom. This might be the biggest transformation of all. People think wealth feels exciting. They picture adrenaline, high-stakes decisions, flashing screens, dramatic moves. But the truth is the opposite. Wealth feels boring, ridiculously boring. It feels like doing the same simple things in the same predictable way over long periods of time, without applause, without drama, without stimulation. The average investor gets bored and destroys their returns. The extraordinary investor gets bored and stays the course. This is why Munger said the first rule of compounding is to never stop it. The second rule is to never get bored. Once you embrace boredom, embrace wealth. 4-4. You reduce your decisions to almost 0. Here's something shocking. The wealthiest people in the world make fewer financial decisions, not more. The average investor makes hundreds of emotional decisions a year. The extraordinary investor makes a small handful of rational ones. Why? Because every decision is an opportunity for emotion to corrupt judgment. So instead of trying to make many perfect decisions, you design your life so you only need to make a few. You automate savings, you automate investing, you establish rules, you create boundaries, you remove emotion entirely. And when decisions become rare, mistakes become rare. That's what creates extraordinary returns. 5, you finally understand the real cost of impatience. Most people underestimate the damage impatience causes. They don't realize selling too early can cost them decades of future returns. Buying too quickly can trap them in terrible investments. Switching strategies can erase years of progress. They don't see the invisible wealth they kill every time. They can't sit still. But once your mindset transforms, you finally see impatience for what it is, the most expensive habit on earth. You treat patience not as a virtue, but as a financial weapon. You learn to sit through chaos. You learn to tolerate discomfort. You learn to ignore noise. You learn to trust time. And that simple shift is what separates ordinary returns from extraordinary ones. 6, you become the kind of person the market rewards. This is the final transformation. The market does not reward people who are emotional, impulsive, fearful, jealous, greedy, or reactive. The market rewards calm, rational, patient, disciplined, long-term, controlled, consistent, humble. This is who you become. Before wealth shows up in your bank account, it shows up in your character. You stop acting like a gambler. You stop thinking like a consumer. You stop reacting like an amateur. You become someone who deserves returns. The average person never will. And once you become that person, once your behavior matches the behavior of extraordinary investors, the returns begin to follow automatically. Not instantly, not dramatically, not overnight, but inevitably, because the simple habit behind 30% returns isn't about stock picks. It isn't about timing. It isn't about luck. It isn't about secret strategies. It's about the transformation inside you. You don't get 30% returns because you try. You get 30% returns because you become the kind of person who no longer destroys their own future. That is Munger's real legacy. That is the real formula. That is the real edge. And that is the habit that turns ordinary people into extraordinary investors.